Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we are looking through some more custom LoR cards as we wait for the new cards, which could be coming out today, and if they are, of course, I will make a video about them. And if not, then I will wait probably only one more day. I can't assume that there'll be, too many more days before we start getting new cards. But with that said, today, right now at least, we are going to go through some of the custom LoR suggestions for reworks of cards. I'm not going to focus on like champions and cards that I have no idea what they're going to do, because I don't know, like I don't know the lore of League, and I think that that's a pretty big part, that the character ties in well with the lore, which I'm sure most of them do, but I personally wouldn't have a clue. And I'm sure that there are some cool concepts in there, no doubt, for custom champions and things like that, but I would just be saying like, oh, that's a cool idea. Oh, that's not a cool idea. Like, there would be no talk of how balanced they would be, or, whether it would work within the game itself. Like, how do you know? I don't know. And no one else would either. So I find that a bit of a useless exercise. But with that said, we are going to go through some other suggestions of reworks of cards that are already in the game. So let's dive in and see what some people are saying. So this first concept is by The Randy Plays, and I will link all of the different Reddit posts in the description down below if you want to check it out yourself. But this is kind of the main part of this suggestion, and it is a change to landmarks, and one that I found particularly interesting. So they've added a keyword here, Singularity, although I don't think this necessarily would need a keyword. Oh well, maybe it would. Yeah, you're right. It probably would need some kind of keyword, but anyway, here we go. Essentially, what they have done is made it so that if the unit or landmark is in play, you transform the cards in your hand into the mentioned card. So if you double draw a landmark that is already in play, then you will instead get whatever the card mentioned on this Singularity effect is. So, for instance, for Grand Plaza here, you've got Honored Lord. For Empress Dice, you've got Sandcrafter. For Starspring, you've got Spring Guardian. It all kind of makes sense. And of course, I'm assuming that this idea would be transformed into all landmarks, right? And this is kind of a... Or maybe it wouldn't need to be on all landmarks, like the Frozen Thralls or any of the... A lot of the countdown ones, I think you could probably let it go because they aren't going to stay there. So maybe this would only need to be put on ones that don't have countdown. I think that probably makes more sense. But it would be interesting, right? Because sometimes you want double Starspring, I guess. Like, not often, but it can be useful sometimes. If you have nothing better to do, well, maybe you'd get the Spring Guardian. Maybe that is better. Yeah. Overall, this is definitely a very interesting idea, and I'm sure, and this is kind of why I wanted to make this video, because I saw this post and was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. And then I started going through some of the others and thought, oh, I can talk about these. And I'm sure a lot of you are probably thinking, this is a great idea. And it's a great idea because, I assume there's only one Grand Plaza. That's what I assume. It's kind of like legendary characters or creatures or things in Magic the Gathering. You can only have one on the board at any one point. I.e., there's only one of them. Unless there's kind of, some cheesy effect where you can have multiple. But generally speaking, you can only have one legendary thing, right? And I think that it makes sense that you can only have one champion on the board at any one point. It's kind of the same rule, but I think it also makes sense for these landmarks, right? Like, I'm sure only one Grand Plaza, so it would make sense. I'm sure there's only one Starspring, so it kind of makes sense that you have these kind of places where there is only one of them, so you can only have one on the board at any point. That to me makes a lot of sense sort of thematically wise, and it would also be a big improvement to some of these cards, because double drawing these cards does often feel bad, and this is a great way as well of balancing these landmarks, because landmarks generally have been pretty bad, but sometimes they've been way too good. Grand Plaza, of course, is a good example of one of those where it was just too strong for quite some time, but this is a great way of kind of being able to tweak these landmarks to find a good middle ground, because you can always change the card that you would get that will make this either stronger or weaker. For instance, if you buffed Honored Lord, then that of course is a buff to Grand Plaza as well. And so you end up with this situation where you can more easily sort of tweak these landmarks to get them to a good middle ground, as opposed to them being sort of too weak or too strong, which is something we've seen, I think, quite a bit of. And so that's something that I really quite like. I think it's a very good idea, and I think overall it's a change that I would probably like to see. I'm not sure that they would do it. It'd be quite a lot of work. You know, they'd need to do it sometime soon before they keep adding more and more landmarks in the game. But you wouldn't need to do it with every landmark. As I said, the countdown ones, of course, leave the board, so that's fine. And I think you would have to think of it thematically. Like, there is probably only one Nux Crying Arena, but there is probably multiple versions of, you know, a Grumpy Rock Bear, or whatever the landmark is for it called, right? So you would be fine to have some have this keyword and others would not. And it would think of the improvements you could make to a card like Vaults of Helia or Nux Crying Arena if you know that the second version is something that's going to synergize with them really well. That would be a really cool idea. And as I say, it would be a great way of being able to balance these cards a bit more easy. It's a bit more to sort of tweak it slightly rather than kind of have to, you know, big nerf or you know, you can't really small nerf these cards is kind of the main issue a lot of the time. And so I think this would be a great change for the game, and I'm sure I'm positive that almost all of you would agree with this kind of change. Sure, you might disagree with exactly what cards, you know, go with which. Like, I'm sure Sandcrafty, some of you are probably thinking, I don't know, if you've already got one on the board, then that's a bit, you know, we've kind of had enough of the Sand Soldiers at this point. But I'm sure most of you will agree this kind of idea as a whole is a really, really good one. And I think, you know, if I was on the dev team, I'd be thinking, that's a good idea. And I think oftentimes, you know, we as like custom things don't think about sort of all the other extra elements of design that, you know, we don't necessarily have to think of, like, you know, like the coding of the game and like the themes of the game as much. I feel like, you know, we as players probably don't think about it as much as the devs do, but I think it does really fit that, you know, there is only one Grand Plaza, so it makes sense that your second copy would turn into, you know, something that is trying to protect that in some way. Like Spring Guardian, obviously, is the Spring Guardian. Makes sense, right? So with that said, on to the next. So this next post is by Adam Majewski. Don't know if I'm saying that right. I am quarter Polish, so I probably should be able to say that right, but probably didn't. And it's a rework of some underused, forgotten cool cards. And so definitely into this. We have Assembly Bot first. Still a 3-mana 1/1. When you cast a spell, grant me 1/1. When you cast a 6+ cost spell, grant me 3/3. Love it. I love the change. It's thematic. It's everything that would help this card. It stays on the theme. For those of you who aren't aware, I've mentioned this before, but what they devs intended for was for Lux Heimerdinger to be a sort of big spell kind of thing with like Progress Day and Remembrance and, you know, any 6+ cost spell. They wanted that to be a deck. It never really came along. And that's, you know, and they've actually just mentioned that before. I did show it once on the channel before. So this completely makes sense. This is the kind of thing that they would do because, you know, that was their initial intention. So giving something extra synergy that pushes their initial intention is the kind of buffs that they tend to go for. Or anytime they rework something, they try and, you know, always pin it back to what was their initial plan. We've seen that with Heimerdinger himself. You know, the Elusive Turret went from the 3-mana turret. They realized that that was too strong, so they made it the 6-mana turret because that was the initial intention. So they wanted you to still play with 6+ cost spells. And so this is a great change. Would it make Assembly Bot, you know, worth playing? No, but I don't think that they necessarily think like that. I think they think about, you know, their sort of intended synergies, what they want the game to look like. And so this is the kind of change that I actually like wouldn't be shocked if it happened. I don't think they'll buff Assembly Bot personally because I just don't. I think there'll be other cards that they can see that they could target that would be sort of more. They'd be more inclined to buff. But if they did buff Assembly Bot, I think that this is the kind of thing that they would go for. Avarosan Marksman, almost messed that up. It's a 4-mana 5/2. Play, deal 1 to a unit. Do it again each round start. 4-mana 5/2 with a deal 1 to a unit and do it again each round start. But currently, Avarosan Marksman, if I'm not mistaken, is a 3-mana 3/1, Would deal 1 to a unit. This to me seems like really strong. I kind of understand where they're coming from. In that, you know, it's an Avarosan card, so they've given it 5 attack and tried to sort of add it to the synergy of cards, like the 5 attack things with like Hearthguard and that. I'm not actually sure that that's where they wanted Avarosan cards to be. And I think another problem is Ashe obviously is kind of the Avarosan leader, I believe. And she's obviously 4 mana, a 4 mana 5/3. You know, I think that this is a strong ability, like really strong. I understand it only has 2 health, but like I still think that that's really strong. Like your minimum, you know, bare minimum, you get something out of this card. And you know, potentially it's probably going to win you the game if they can't deal with it at all. It has 5 attacks, so it's a threat in itself. It can trade with pretty much anything up to probably turn 6. Yeah, this would be a very strong card, but I think outside of the fact that it would be like probably too strong, I just don't think that they would go for this because Ashe is also a 4 mana card, and I think what they like to do with these champions is obviously make any champion followers kind of fit within that play pattern of the card, and I think once you get past like 3 mana, you don't want necessarily to have 2 4-drops and 2 5-drops because you're just going to end up playing Ashe. I think that that's probably where their design space is, where, you know, yes, you're going to have, you know, some 1-drops, quite a few 2-drops, probably quite a few 3-drops. But then once it gets to 4, like you might only have 3 copies of a 4-cost card. You might only have 3 copies of a 5-cost card. That has changed a bit, I think. It used to be very much like that. I think that has changed a bit, but I still think overall they probably wouldn't do this. I think if they were going to buff Everos and Marksman, they'd just simply make it a 3/2. I actually don't think it would be that bad of a card as a 3/2. I really don't. I think dealing 1 to a unit against like aggro is really quite good. And having a 3/2 body on an effect like that is quite good. And I think there's a reason that they haven't made too many other effects like that. Because I think it would be really strong. And I think the Averos and Marksman is not that far off being playable anyway. And so I don't necessarily even think it needs that big of a buff, to be honest. But on to the next, we find Parade Electro Rig. So this is what is it currently? A 3 mana 2/4, I think. Now it's a 4 mana 3/4. Support, create 4 exact copies of the support ally in your deck. Draw 1 of them. Again, quite strong. Really quite strong. I think if you were going to draw 1 of them, I personally would probably make it 5 mana instead. Just because you could get some, there would probably be some crazy combo in this with this kind of card. You know, if you think about attacking multiple times, like in the same round, you know, and you keep drawing a certain card. I don't exactly know what that card would be, but you know, I'm assuming there would be something that would be quite strong with that, which I have no problem in making this a strong card. I just think that on turn 4 that might be pretty good. And you know, does like currently I think the wording of this would suggest this could be done with champions as well, which I think probably wouldn't be the case if you were going to have something like this, and you could draw it reliably, because then you have to be very careful with like every champion spell. Because if a champion spell is too good, then you know you just end up with, you know, you're just gonna fill your deck with the same champion over and over and over again, and then just keep using an overpowered champion spell. Like, you know, you have to be very careful with that. And so I'm not certain that this is the direction that they would go, at least with champions, because I think they're very wary about, you know, having multiple champions and only want to limit it to certain big effects like the harrowing or something. But it's a cool idea. I think, you know, with some tweaks, this is a pretty cool idea overall. And Voices of the Old Ones, rounding us out. 6 mana, slow speed. Summon 2 Faces of the Old Ones. Draw an 8+ cost card for each extra mana gem you have. Summon 2 Faces of the Old Ones. That's the 2 mana thing, isn't it? 6 mana slow gives you 2 units. Draw an 8+ cost card for each extra mana gem you have. So kind of a full ramp synergy. I don't know. This feels like an effect that's too. I don't know. This is an interesting one. You're summoning 2 units, and if they don't have something that's a threat, I think it might be a little weak. But I kind of like it. It's different, unique. It feels pretty cool. But I think that the current card is pretty cool in itself. I understand it's not a great card, but I think it's kind of, you know, a big effect. It's a nice, cool, powerful effect. I kind of like that. But this isn't a bad idea. I don't mind this at all either. And we'll go on to our last little suggestions. So our last suggestions come from Peppermint Daniel, and let's see. We start with Quinn, whose only change, as far as I can tell, is the level up. You've attacked 6 times. God, this would require some math. So currently, I've seen you attack 4 times, right? Let's think. So you're probably not going to have a scout on turn 1. So let's say you attack on turn 1. That's 1 attack. You're going to attack on turn 3. Again, you probably don't have a scout, most likely. So that's only 2. And then it gets to turn 5. And you're pretty much in the same exact spot with Quinn. Now, if you attack on evens, you attack on 2. You probably have Grizzled Ranger, let's say, on 4. So that, let's say that's attacking 3 times. Then you play Quinn. You attack next turn. Yeah, this is probably fine. It would get, when you're attacking evens, it would like get Quinn leveled up slightly quicker. You'd also get to level up Quinn in the deck. Maybe that would be too strong. I don't know. It's fine, right? It's fine. Maybe it could be 7. I don't know. But it's perfectly fine. I don't have a major problem with it. Green Fang Warden to a 2/3. And a perfectly fine change. I don't think many people would complain about that. It seems pretty reasonable to me. Lux 4 mana. 3/4. Is this the same? I've seen you cast 6. So same text, just a 4 mana 3/4. I highly doubt that they would do this. I would not be shocked if it took literal years and years before they ever change a champion down 2 mana again. After what happened with Lee Sin, they might just say, let's never do that again. That 1 mana decrease is the most we're ever going to do, and we'll see if it's good enough or not. And if it's not, then make more changes. I think that would probably be their balance philosophy from now on. I'd be shocked if it wasn't, because after Lee Sin and what went so horribly wrong with Lee Sin, I think that they probably have realized, yeah, let's not decrease any champion by 2 mana, no matter how bad it looks. And Lux right now does not look as bad as Lee Sin did back then. This would probably make Lux one of the best champions in the game, and be very frustrating to play against. Did you realize you have to kill Lux, who has like 4 health as well? I understand it probably wouldn't be as frustrating as Lee Sin, but still, I don't think that they would ever do this, and I think that that's for good reason, because changing the mana of a card is like by far the biggest buff that you can get, outside of just completely reworking it, of course. But giving a mana buff to a card is like the biggest buff by far you can give most cards. Giving something a 2 mana buff, like reduce, that is like you cannot explain how astronomical it is, especially for like most champions who are like kind of engines in themselves, like Lux is. It's just such a massive buff, because on turn 4, you know, you don't always reliably have answers, especially for something with barrier. You know, you're not going to reliably have answers on turn 4 in most decks. And, you know, you're pretty much going to probably level up Lux by, like, the next turn, right? So, yeah, that would be quite scary, I think. And so I don't think that they would do that. But on to the next. Oh, so look, it's just another Lux. Catagrin. This is the kind of card I could see buffed. Is a 9 mana 9/9, which is the same, I think. The first time an ally with Fury kills a unit each round, summon a dragon from your deck. Does that make sense? I'm just like, it's turn 9, right? Like, in some scenarios, it will be like useful, I guess. I don't know. I don't think this would be that useful, especially because it's a Demacian dragon, and so therefore, you know, there isn't like a cool, like, if this was in Targon, right? You could, and this was the effect, you might be able to pull off some sort of Freljord Targon ramp deck where, you know, you use Catagrin and then you summon Aurelian Soul, like, you know, even if he's not in your hand, and you just get a free ASOL. That is something that I think, you know, makes sense. But because it's in Demacia, and therefore you're going to probably have to be playing Demacia Targon, it makes less sense, I think, overall. And I think, you know, your board is, like, the whole point of dragons is that they're, you know, big and sort of aren't going to die a lot of the time, so you're probably going to run out of board space very quick. So I don't think that this is what exactly is needed for Catagrin. Definitely not if it stays at this mana cost. Now, if Catagrin came down in mana, you know, to like 7 or something, then it would make a lot more sense, because by turn 7, you probably haven't summoned like that most dragons, and quite a few things might have died. So that would make sense. But I think at 9 mana, I'm not sure that's the effect that you're really looking for. It's kind of a cool idea. And as I say, if this was in Targon, it would kind of create, I think, a kind of a cool like ramp deck that maybe could work. But I don't think that this would work in Demacia. Captain Erika. 4 mana 2/2. Play, capture a unit or landmark. So they've kept, with spell shield, so they kept the text, made her a 2/2, and given, and what is she, 8 mana? Pretty sure it's an 8 mana card, right? You give something a 4 mana decrease. So this becomes a 4 mana vengeance on a body. I understand they can technically get it back, but this is way too strong. And I'm sure most of you don't need to be told why. That this is way too strong. That's all I'm going to say. It's way too strong. Don't do that. Picks. 0 mana 0/1. So a lot of people have suggested making Pix 0 mana. I think it makes sense. I think either you have to do something with Pix. Either make it a 0 mana card, and I like the fact they brought it back down to 1 health if they did make it a 0 mana card, or give it 1 attack, right? It has to be one or the other. Making it a 0 mana card would be the bigger buff, and perhaps, you know, better for the whole archetype as, you know, as the support archetype. So yeah, this one I'm kind of all for. You know, let's make support just busted. Why not? Let's go for it. Yusari, a card that doesn't make a lot of sense. This is a good card to rework. 4 mana 4/3, elusive still, but loses the challenger, which makes sense. To play me, recall an ally and summon a living shadow in its place. Kind of like Solitary Monk or the Navori Conspirator, where you have to recall an ally. So that kind of makes sense. So that's fine. But summon a living shadow in its place? Is that not like crazy good for a 4 mana 4/3 elusive? Am I crazy? Like imagine you use this on a Dancing Droplet, the 1/1. So you'd play a 4 mana 4/3 elusive. You get a 3/2 ephemeral as well. You also draw a card. I think that might be just a little bit broken, but maybe that's just me. So outside of the fact that this is broken, I kind of like it. It's a nice idea as a whole. Obviously, that this is just way too strong, but it's a kind of a cool idea as a whole, and I don't mind it. You know, it's kind of synergistic with what it is. Is Yusari the only challenger within Ionia? If so, that's kind of weird. There might be like one other that I'm not thinking of. But if it is only Yusari, why is that the case? It's kind of an interesting idea. I kind of wonder, did like Zed have challenger back in the day, and that's kind of like, or elusive back in the day in an early design? Maybe, right? Yasuo, 2 mana. Wow, we're just going crazy with it. When you stun or recall an enemy, I strike it. I've struck 3 times. Is this also Yasuo leveled up? It is, so let's see. So obviously becomes a 3/3. Strike, grant me 2/0. Grant me 2 attack when you strike. When you stun or recall an enemy, I strike it. Okay, let's start with this side. Let's start with the obvious thing. 2 mana, right? A 2 mana 2/2. Changing the level up to I've struck 3 times. I kind of like that. Don't know how that would work necessarily with like the lore of Yasuo, whether he's more of a strike or more of a stun type thing. Don't know. I know that like he uses sword to strike things, so I guess it makes sense to me. Kind of a cool idea with the whole level up. Again, I'm not sure that they would ever change any champion to be less 2 mana, and I think Yasuo's ability as a whole is too strong to be as a 2 mana champion. You know, you think about like this against any aggro is dead. Like as soon as this card is printed, like aggro dead, right? Forget playing aggro, because in aggro decks, you're probably not going to have many ways to kill Yasuo. You know, you're not going to be able to trade against Yasuo very well. And you're also, you know, going to get stunned, which is already bad for you. But your units are going to die from, like, the early turn. So this would just be a death sentence for aggro, which I don't think that they would do. But I kind of like the level up change. That kind of makes sense to me. And I don't mind making Yasuo less mana if you did go down that route. I just think that 2 is a little too early. You could make it 3 and I'd be much more happy. But what I do want to say about this is that I love this kind of idea. Strike, grant me 2 attack. I think that that's a really cool idea, and that's one that like I genuinely could see them doing, because then Yasuo like would scale much better to the late game. You know, he'd be able to kill anything at that point and become a threat himself. This is a great change. If they added this to Yasuo's level up, that would be an incredible change. A really cool change. God, that might be how you fix Yasuo. Like, forget the 2 mana thing and forget all the rest of it. Just if you just add this little bit of text onto Yasuo's leveled up form, that would be really, really good, I think. Because then he turns into a real threat. Like, on his own. Obviously, when you just attack normally, you'll get the extra attack as well. But then anytime you stun, it's like, oh yeah, this is what it needs. This is... Yasuo will become, like, pretty powerful. But because Yasuo is a very synergistic champion, I'm perfectly fine with that. You know, you can't just slap Yasuo in any deck. You have to play with stuns. That is such a cool idea. Oh, man, there'd be so many good decks if this was the case. You could play Leona Yasuo all of a sudden. You might play Malphite Yasuo all of a sudden. You know, Swain Yasuo. This would be great if they added this text on. So, even though I'm not in a like agreeing with the whole thing, great idea here. I'd never thought about that as an idea, but what a great idea. And so that's all of our posts, I think. So I will link the posts down below so that you can see them. You can also sort of read the comments if you want to. But thank you so much for watching. This has been really fun. I do really quite like doing this, you know, because even when I don't necessarily agree with all of them, I mean, this Yasuo is a great example. You can find just like gems of like, even if you don't agree with the whole concept, just certain ideas just are like, that is a great idea. And so yeah, I wouldn't. Oh, man, I really want them to do that, because that would be so cool. That would be such a big change. Oh, I really hope someone at Riot look at this post. Please look at this post. I wonder if they ever have been on Custom LoR, just to see, you know, maybe try and get an idea or two. But thank you so much for watching. I'll be back potentially today if new cards come out today. And so thank you so much for watching. Have a really nice day, and I'll see you next time.